Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Leo Sanchimanyavu, thank you for joining us. I'm Karina Dominguez. Patty Talahangva is away. 3 more churches on indigenous land in British Columbia were found in flames this past weekend. A total of 5 church burnings have occurred in the province in the last few weeks. Elected chiefs are speaking out against the fires, trying to bring people together. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
Early in the morning this past Saturday, 2 more Catholic churches burned to the ground in the south interior of British Columbia. Lower Similkameen Indian Band Chief Keith Crow said he received a call about a fire at Chopaka Church, but when he arrived, it was too late.
One of my members had called me at about 4 o'clock in the morning and had told me that the church is on fire, and then I went to the site. I was there by 4:30. By the time I got there, there was half a wall left standing.
That same morning, another church, St. Anne's Church in Upper Similkameen Band, was burnt to the ground, bringing a total of 4 Catholic churches burnt a month after the discovery of the bodies on the grounds of the Kamloops Residential School. Penticton RCMP said investigators are looking for possible connection between the fires and the southern interior. The investigation into the previous fires and these 2 fires are ongoing with no arrest or charges. Chief Crow says he's talked to community members that regularly attend all 4 churches. They are upset.
We have a devout Catholic following in our community, that there is a group, and they're upset, obviously, with all the churches being burnt down.
That Saturday morning, this time in northern BC, another church was found on fire in Gilwangak, the St. Paul's Anglican Church, which was an abandoned building. According to an RCMP press release, the New Hazelton Fire Department responded, putting out the flames. The church is still standing. The RCMP are treating this fire as suspicious and are looking to determine what, if any, connection there may be to the recent church fires in the South Okanagan within First Nation communities. In a social media post, Gitwangak Chief Sandra Laren expressed her opposition to the violence standing in front of the church.
This isn't the way. Begetting violence with violence is just not going to get us anywhere.
Back on the southern interior, Chief Crow said his nation's making plans to come together and hopes to stop division due to the church fires and the new discoveries of bodies at other residential schools across Canada.
The other residential schools that are finding more bodies and people in unmarked graves, it's tough. And our community is hurting, our survivors are hurting, and they're the ones being impacted most by this.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
The MHA Nation is set to open Healing Hearts Lodge, a $7 million transitional housing facility in Bismarck, North Dakota. The lodge will provide a sober living environment for women over 18 who have completed a treatment program. Residents can stay up to a year and a half while they continue their recovery. The first 3 months are at no cost to the residents. After that, it's $500 a month. According to the American Addiction Centers, the rate of substance use for Native Americans is higher than the non-Native population at 10%. Sienna Rabbithead is the director of Healing Hearts, and she says she knows the first-hand effects of addiction.
I have family members, and I have very close family members who may not at this moment be willing to take those steps, but it's important for me to be able to provide or help create that space when they are ready to, that we're there. Like you said, there's not a lot of places out there that have this opportunity. So I think it's huge that the chairman and the council have decided to come together and really support our tribal members.
The Women's Lodge is close to MHA's Good Road Recovery Center, making it an easy transition from the treatment program. Rabbit Head says they've been taking applications the last few weeks and are expected to move women in July 6th. Canada's Google Doodle is honoring Mohawk activist and women's rights champion Mary 2X Early. 2X Early fought for decades against the discrimination contained in Canada's Indian Act. The doodle, which was viewable on Google's search page on Monday, was created by Mohawk artists Star Horn and Courtney Montour. Montour is also a filmmaker and the creator of the short documentary Mary 2X Early, I Am Indian Again. To read more, check out the website indiancountrytoday.com and search for Canada's Google Doodle honors Mohawk activists. And those are your headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Karina Dominguez. When we come back, it's the new adventures of Super Indian with Arigon Starr.
Plus, we check in with Holly Cook Macarro and how actions at the interior will impact Indian Country. Commodity cheese, love it or hate it, but for one mythical character, it gives him superpowers. Cartoonist Arigon Starr presents Super Indian. In conjunction with the Autry Museum of the American West, virtual audiences can listen to new episodes. Welcome, Arigon.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful, wonderful program. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us about the new adventures of Super Indian.
Well, what's exciting about the new adventures of Super Indian is seeing my work come full circle back to Native Voices at the Autry. That's a theater company based in Los Angeles at the Autry Museum of the West. And in 2006, there was an initiative for radio people to come, and learn how to do audio theater, which is something that harkens back to way back in the day. And, like the days of radio serials. So Super Indian was written as a 10-minute episode presented at the National Audio Theater Festivals in 2006. And then in 2007, the Autry decided to produce more episodes of the show. So we did 10 5-minute episodes that were eventually packaged as a 1-hour special that went on the radio all across the country. And I still had stories to tell from the Super Indian universe, and I took those stories, developed them into a web comic, and then into printed comics. Currently, there's 2 volumes of Super Indian out now. I'm working on a 3rd. And in December, the Native Voices at the Autry, they came back to me and they said, hey, what if we did another round of audio theater episodes? Because a lot of people are tired of being on Zoom. Because we were, straight into the pandemic, as we kind of still are. And we did the audio theater shows on Zoom. We recorded 16 different actors speaking 95 different speaking parts. And all of it was put together with audio files being sent to an editor in England, of all places. And he put everything together with the actors' performances, sound effects, and music. And then the Autry is currently hosting those 3 episodes for free up on their website. It's totally cool.
I've had a chance to listen to a few myself, and I loved them. It is so incredible to think that all of this came together on Zoom. That is so very interesting. Can you tell us, how did you come up with this idea? Where did it start for you?
The idea started, oddly enough, in Brisbane, Australia. I was at a theater kind of retreat with theater professionals from across Canada and the US, and we were talking to Aboriginal Indigenous there about, how do we represent our community? And one thing that I was talking to one of the other playwrights about was, why aren't there more Native superheroes that are actually written by Native people, drawn by Native people? And it was kind of a fun discussion, but I took notes, and that idea stayed in the back of my head for the longest time. And hearkening back to my own love of comics, because I am a big comic nerd, I thought about, everybody from, of course, Superman to Batman to Spider-Man, etc. But I really liked the idea of somebody eating tainted commodity cheese and gaining superpowers.
That is quite funny. I love that idea as well. What is typically the reaction when people either read or watch or listen to your work? What do you hear from them?
Well, of course, they love to laugh, and I love making them laugh. And so there's a lot of humor that's built into the show. This is not your sort of grim, brooding superhero. This is a kid that lives with both of his parents in a Native community and encounters his community every day as a janitor at the bingo hall. So he's got a very normal life, but there are elements outside of his world on the reservation that want to kind of mess up the fun. So he is developing his powers, because this tainted cheese, you just don't know what, one day he's got ice breath, the next day he's got fire breath, the next day he's flying. It's fun, and I love having that element of surprise for this young guy.
I could imagine. Can you tell us about the graphic novels?
Absolutely. Okay, so I told you about the web comics. All of the comic professionals that I talked to at the various Comic Cons that I went to said, well, this is a great idea, but don't print a book first, because they'll just stay in your garage. What you should do is start the comic online and build an audience. Well, I knew that Super Indian already had an audience because of the radio programs. So I said, okay, I'm going to just do it online. So I did, it's kind of like 3 panels every week. And that started in 2011. And then by 2012, I had enough material to publish a book. And that's what I did. So those issues are there, and those were based on the episodes from the radio show. So I had already built this world. This universe already existed. All I had to do is tell their stories and learn how to draw like a Marvel person or a DC comic person.
That was going to be my next question. Do you do the drawing yourself?
Yes, I do. I know this kind of surprises people. It's like, oh, you're just an actor, or you're just a writer, you're just an artist. It's like, no, I am all those things. I'm a musician too. And I have been given a lot of talents and a lot of support in life from my parents and my family. So it made sense to pursue all avenues. And comics were always something that was in my life, and that I wanted to see myself in. So it made me want to draw better, do better, learn better.
I want to take a step back and talk about the pandemic. At Indian Country Today, we've spoke to a number of artists in various mediums who have said that either the pandemic has sort of stifled their creative process, and others have said it has really helped them be creative, to have the time to do it. What was your experience through the pandemic and working on your creative projects?
Well, I have found that this has been probably one of the most creative times I have ever had. And I think it was because people were at home and looking for entertainment and looking for, ways to see their experiences reflected in art or in writing. I did so many comic projects the last year, everything from working with another writer at the Nib and talking about the social distance powwow. It was like a lengthy comic about that particular phenomena, because we still wanted to get together. We still wanted to dance. And it was fun to tell that story in a comic. And then also there was another project for the Nib about a Navajo nurse who lost her life, just working in a hospital. That story needed to be told too. So my art and my writing, I flourished. I'm still flourishing. And I'm really happy to have that opportunity, but also sad to not be able to go to a Comic Con or to get together with my other creative friends. So, it's the next best thing. It's not the best, but we're making it through like we always do.
And I can imagine, in 5 years, 10 years, when you're going back and looking at your work and seeing these characters who are going to or attending social distance powwows and, going through the pandemic with the rest of us, it's almost like documenting this time as well through your work.
Yeah, it sure is. And I know that even this experience has changed me. It's changing my work. And it's provided a weird focus, to really, because you're not doing all of the stuff that, I used to do, to go out to do. And, you're in your head, you're in your process. And I think that that is, interesting, because writing for me right now is easier. Drawing right now is easier for me.
Tell us, what's next for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, one thing I'm really excited about is working with Cherokee author Tracy Sorrell on a children's book about Chief, well, I don't want to say Chief but I think he liked it. Albert Bender, who was an Ojibwe pitcher for the Philadelphia Athletics, and Jack Myers, who is a Cahuilla Indian who was a catcher and a power hitter for the New York Giants. And in 1911, and of course I'm probably getting it wrong because I'm not looking at it. This is in the early 1900s. They met each other as players in a World Series game. What? People don't know.
And are you all writing it? Are you doing the writing or you're doing the illustration of this book?
Because I know a lot of people that know me online and in person know how much I love baseball. So to be able to put my favorite things in life, which of course are Native people and baseball, together in a book for kids, wow, this is great. So I'm working on this right now and it's exciting.
And when will this book publish?
This book is not coming out till 2023. It's gonna, I mean, that's the nature of books and book publishing. But it will be coming out then, published by Kokila Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House.
Well, good things take time, right?
Yes, they do.
It was great catching up with you, Arigon, and we'll definitely have to catch up with your projects in the future. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, and miss you, Indie Country.
We'll be right back with Holly Cook Macarro. Holly Cook Macarro is a regular political contributor to our broadcast. She's a partner with Spirit Rock Consulting and is here to break down what's happening in Washington. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you, Aaliyah. It's good to be here.
Let's start off by talking about the recent news coming out of the Department of the Interior. Secretary Deb Haaland has committed to investigating the full scope of federal Indian boarding schools in the United States. In your experience, what does it take to have a sweeping investigation like this happen? How long does it typically take, and who are the players who are usually involved in something like this?
This is something that jumped out at me right away, Aaliyah, in terms of the discovery of the remains of the 215 children at Kamloops, which was announced on June 1st, and really received a lot of coverage there. Then we had the announcement of the discovery of the 750 remains at the Saskatchewan boarding school about 3 weeks later on June 24th. But on June 22nd, just think of that, 3 weeks later, Secretary Haaland made the announcement about the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. It was preceded by her op-ed in the Washington Post. And really, I think in addition to the substantive importance of the initiative, the announcement underscores the voice that Secretary Haaland has brought to the cabinet table and to the Biden administration as a whole. Normally, if there were an idea by someone to have an initiative like this, building off of the announcement in Canada. They would have to brief, they would have to educate, there would be both at the secretarial, all the way up to the secretarial level, White House review, solicitor review, internal discussion, all of those things. It would, I would say, had we not had a Native person at the helm of the Department of Interior sitting in the secretary's seat who knows that story and that experience personally, it would have taken more than a year. But the timeliness and immediacy of Secretary Holland's announcement and their ability to craft that in a way that is going to be meaningful in Indian country, that it's going to have a report on the remains of the possible remains of Indian children at the federal Indian boarding schools in America through consultation with tribes. And in that process, also importantly, that is not really mentioned in the announcement of the initiative, is the education level and awareness in the United States for the experience of, just for most of us, just 1-2 generations back in our families, of the boarding school experience in Indian country.
Given the seniority level of Secretary Holland, this boarding school initiative, as you mentioned, has caught the attention of major news outlets, and I've been seeing regular discussion about this on social media. Do you think that that was intended in terms of, bringing visibility to non-Native people about federal Indian boarding schools?
If it weren't intended, then it's certainly a silver lining of this initiative. And there are differences between the boarding schools in Canada, the system, the secular and non-secular nature, which I think I've noted before, but the attention that is being paid, and I've seen it sometimes, as you know, we all live and work in Indian country. We'll see one drop of something, but there's been continuous coverage over the last few weeks about the boarding school discoveries in Canada, and which has spurred that discussion about the boarding schools in America. Stories we know because there are families and they in our communities, and the impacts of those that we see today. So certainly all the mainstream media coverage that is coming together around this issue, if it weren't intended, it's very much a silver lining.
This investigation and the initiative is set to ultimately culminate in a report to Secretary Holland, and that's set to happen next year. I believe it's in the spring of next year. Can you tell us, do you think that there will be any policy, like concrete policy items, action items that will come from whatever that report might say, and what do you think that we can expect after it's finished?
Well, certainly the action items and resulting policy will depend on what is included in the report. The scope of missing children in America is, we don't know if it's on the same scale as what we've begun to see with the discoveries in Canada. We've certainly already had some of those discoveries at Carlisle and other schools. And some of these discoveries and surrounding repatriation laws, the opening up of records and availability of those records. I think this report and the investigation and hearing from tribes about what they need to know, what families need to know, what our communities need to know, and taking that and putting that in the report and looking at ways that we can empower tribal communities to find out this information, to bring their children home, and make those processes easier, I think will be an overarching policy impact, but the details of those will depend on the report.
A lot of the talk that I've been seeing on social media has said that a lot of people feel very confident that this investigation and initiative will unfortunately uncover truths that are really sad, that they think that there will be children and bodies and people found at these boarding schools. How do you think that Indian country and policymakers, how do you attempt to prepare yourself to, I guess, emotionally take on the information that might come soon?
I think it's been hard for us all to listen to the unimaginable numbers that are coming out of Canada. And when for all of us who heard the boarding school stories from our parents, or have seen the impacts of not growing up with your own parents in a loving atmosphere and learning how to parent and raise your own children, seeing those impacts, that I think it's going to be more of a shock for those who haven't heard our story about the impacts and the history of Indian boarding schools in America. And so I think for those folks, it's going to be shocking to know that this is a very recent history. This isn't, hundreds of years ago. This is not one, as I mentioned, 1 or 2 generations back. It's very recent history in our families, and the intergenerational impacts that we see today, I think there will be a foundation and an education level that's raised, but being prepared. I don't know how you prepare yourself for that.
And that's something that Secretary Holland herself talked about when she unveiled this initiative. She said, "This happened to my own family."
Yes, again, that perspective, that enabled her to move very quickly. She knows she didn't have to be briefed. She didn't have to get a lot of sessions of information. She knew what to do.
Great. Thanks for breaking it down, and thanks for being here, Holly.
Yes, thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Thank you for watching.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.